This is a conversation with Jim Hirsch on Wednesday, December 15, 1999. Jim is in Chicago.
Hello?
Yeah, this is Jim Hirsch.
Hi, Jim. Mike Scully here.
Okay. Now, Mike, I just called my doctor. He wasn't there. They're going to page him. So I might have to kind of go in and out of this call
That's
a couple
fine.
times just to make sure.
Yeah, that's fine.
The rest of them, I'll just take messages. But if I get him, I'll just either call you back or put you on hold, okay?
Yeah, I understand. And I guess the first thing I should say, if we were going to talk for a while, is would you prefer that I call you back so this is on my ticket? I don't want to...
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Okay.
You'll be there. Will I get through the switchboard? Is that...
Just dial 130.
Okay,
My
okay.
direct extension.
All right. Oh, so 728-6000 and then 130.
Yep.
Okay, I'll do that. Bye-bye. Now running. I can't write fast enough to make these things useful if I can't. What I've been doing initially, as far as the Folk Alliance is concerned, I've been doing other things, is talking to most of the people who were on, as many as I could reach, which is looking like it's going to be all pretty soon, the people who were on the steering committee that formed out of Malibu. And so it's in that context that I called you. I mean, I'm familiar generally with the Old Town School. I've read that nice booklet that was done a few years ago about it, and I've just heard about it over the years. But really the focus of my efforts right now are devoted to the work of the Alliance. So if I could sort of plug into that right away, I guess at this point, since I have talked to a number of people, I've been getting a lot of repetition about some of the earliest history of the meeting in Malibu and what have you. So maybe we can get back to that. I'd like to plunge into right now. You guys came out of the steering committee with a statement of purpose that set forth 5 goals. I don't know if you remember what they were, but I could run them through you right now.
I remember that there was a goal for advocacy.
Right, I can run them through you. It's not a test like George Bush. But
see if I can remember it.
Okay.
But there was also a service to the field.
Right.
Yeah. Which was the one that I really kind of hammered on.
Well, you got field development and professional development, right?
Yeah,
right.
Professional development was the one that was kind of my personal crusade.
Right. Okay. And then networking and education.
Yeah.
So I guess I kind of want to get started in there, because I've been a more or less casual observer of the Folk Alliance. I've joined, even though I kind of have no business doing so. I joined back in '92 or '93, and
I've been to a conference.
I've been to 3 conferences, yeah, including the one in Albuquerque, and I skipped a few. I went to Tucson, Boston, skipped a number of years, and went to Albuquerque. So yeah, I've got a pretty good sense of what those conferences are like. But from a casual participant such as myself, you kind of get the impression that the biggest impact the Folk Alliance has is that it holds these annual shindigs and then kind of recedes. And I'm wondering if you think, with those 5 goals sort of as a reference point, if you think it's had any impact beyond internal, any external impact.
I think it's had a lot of external impact, but I totally hear where you're going with this and why you think that. And in fact, you know, as an original steering committee member, and as someone who has, you know, devoted a great deal of time and effort to the Folk Alliance, not to mention a great deal of institutional support and personal financial support, there are, you know, it can be frustrating to sort of to look at the Folk Alliance and kind of wonder why there isn't more than there is. So, I mean, that part of kind of the inference of your question, I agree with to a degree. But to say that it's only had an internal impact, I think would really be to miss the point.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is, first of all, I think that a lot of the educational work that they've done has made folk institutions stronger. And by doing that, it certainly has impacted their communities. You know, I mean, I have personally taught, you know, workshops at every single Folk Alliance conference except for one since the first year. And what I've noticed is that the degree of sophistication in terms of things like fundraising, marketing, board development, a lot of the kind of nuts and bolts issues of not-for-profit management, I'm seeing tons of improvement.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that, to a degree that those messages are getting through. In fact, I just talked to Elaine Weisman, speaking of the Folk Alliance, and they just got a building donated from the city of Los Angeles.
For her organ, the California Traditional Music Society? Great.
Something that we had done, 4 years ago. The city of Chicago gave us a 43,000 square foot former library. And so, I would go to the conference and I would talk to people like Elaine and other executive directors and say, that we've really had some success doing stuff like this. You might want to try it.
Right.
And conversely, I've also gotten, that kind of feedback from other people. Well, we've tried this in our community, and, so I think that networking and the education are two that I can point to that I believe have had significant impact outside of what, the sense of just being just an internal thing.
Now, does that impact extend beyond the annual 4 or 5 day get-together?
Well, I think it does.
Okay.
I think that people bring, what they've learned back with them, and if they're smart, they apply it.
Right.
Not to mention, and that's just like on the educational track, on the musical track, a lot of us go there and hear artists that we would have never heard otherwise. We bring them to our venues. Every year at the Folk Alliance, we'll hear a handful of artists that we'll bring to Chicago and expose to our market. So I think that goes beyond internal as well.
Right.
However, one small little quibble I have, maybe not so small, is that the Folk Alliance in many ways has turned more into a talent showcase than almost anything else.
Okay, I understand what you mean. Yeah. Well, there was a peer group session for traditional music in Albuquerque, which turned into a discussion about how those interested in tradition can, in a very real sense, reclaim the Folk Alliance. It was very much about that, although that was
the biggest bunch of bullshit I think I've ever heard in my life.
Okay, speak on that. You obviously have some, the issues, and you've got some feelings about it.
Stuff like that, it just makes me want to, find a banjo and smash it around. And the reason being is that, the Folk Alliance is an organization that's made up of a lot of individual interests, or, quote, special interests. It's so funny, we all complain about, political action committees and stuff like that, and then, we see little groups within the Folk Alliance, that, want to rattle the cage to gain more attention. It's the same damn thing.
Well, democracy is made up of special interest groups. I don't get and that's the way things are supposed to work.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, the traditional music element of the Folk Alliance is an important element. They have their needs, and the Folk Alliance needs to be responsive to, them to the degree that they can be.
Mm-hmm.
But they can't serve every, individual interest. Like, what about the dance community? What about the Canadians? What about the singer-songwriters? What about the this? What about the that? The fact of the matter is that if you look at the Folk Alliance's programming, and then you compare it against who's coming and in what numbers they're coming, it's probably fairly representative.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in my view, and I don't have any specific data, but it might be interesting to do it, is the traditional music community, I would guess, makes up no more than 10% of the membership of the Folk Alliance.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's 15%.
Right.
So, my guess is the traditional music programming is probably about equally represented in the Folk Alliance.
Or proportionately represented.
Or proportionally is what I mean.
Right, okay. A couple of people have told me that the gathering in Malibu really began as a group of people who were interested more in traditional music, or actually what I prefer to call vernacular music. I don't know. Was that your sense of it as well?
I really hate the direction that you're taking this.
Okay, why don't you?
Well, I mean, I guess I don't understand like the differentiations between traditional music and world music and singer-songwriters. I mean, the only difference is that these are types of music that are at different stages in their evolutionary path. And if the folk music world can't have a pretty big umbrella, then we're just as stupid and irrelevant as I sort of feared we were back in 1989 or 88 or whenever the thing happened.
Okay.
So I don't really give a shit about people's like little internecine, biases towards this type of music or that type of music. Do I think that the Malibu thing? I think that the Malibu thing was made up of people that had a certain level of stature, that were kind of well known, that came from larger organizations like Sing Out or like the Old Town School of Folk Music or some of the festivals, and people that Elaine knew. Now maybe what the people that Elaine knew mostly came out of that world.
Right.
But I mean, if the intent of your question is, has the Folk Alliance moved away from its like roots or its original intent? I think it's a bullshit frame of reference.
That's fine. I want to stress something to you, which is that I see I'm writing about the Folk Alliance because I think it's a good forum in which these issues get played out, and my questions really are intended to reflect what I'm hearing, and not, I think you've already decided I have a certain slant, and I think you're probably wrong.
Okay.
But these are issues. As I say, I was at that session I described was real.
Is talk to 6 Canadians, and then you'll get the Canadian issue.
Oh, sure.
Talk to 6 folk dancers, and you'll get the folk dancers.
And I hope to talk to a lot of people, and that's why I'm getting your take on it right now.
My take on it is that the Folk Alliance, as our field in general, like I said, needs to have the biggest tent that we can possibly carve out for it.
Right.
Because otherwise we become trivialized into these tiny little subgenres that like 2.5 people care about.
Sure.
Now I happen to come from a different perspective. There might be people that would hear what I've just said and want to smash the banjo over my head, But I'm talking from the perspective of an institution that's got a $6 million annual budget,
right,
that has an audience of in excess of 350,000 people a year.
Mm-hmm.
So the Old Town School's always been about being broad and being diverse and really, making the tent as large as possible. So that's my frame of reference.
Let me ask a question about that then, and this time I don't have an answer for. But how do you, what within that big tent enables you, and you don't have to use the Folk Alliance as a frame of reference, use the Old Town School if you want. What enables you to retain an identity if the tent is that broad? You know the lineup. You can do it in political parties anywhere. If you identify yourself with everything, you identify yourself ultimately with nothing. How do you retain an identity?
Well, our identity has been forged over 44 years
Sure.
serving the community,
right,
and people have a strong sense of what the Old Town School is and who they are. And the identity is forged depending, again, on your experience at the school. If you're a student, the identity is probably most forged by who your teacher is.
Sure.
What we've tried to do is, when I started here as director in '82, I was fighting a battle of trying to make anybody accept folk music. I mean, everybody thought it was like, protest singers and,
right,
this and that. It was that very narrow kind of white, folk revival definition.
Yes.
We live in a city here in Chicago that's got, hundreds of different languages spoken. To me, folk music is the music that happens in every one of those little communities in Chicago.
Me too.
As well as, the stuff that, that the revivalists sang. But our job was to broaden the definition for people of this community so that they really understood that folk music is, kind of where we all start with all of our cultural expressions and identities, et cetera, et cetera. So that was always our working definition. And I think the Folk Alliance, if it wants to be relevant, broad, and strong, also needs to do that. I'll give you an Old Town School example. We're teaching a rap class right now.
Right.
Now, a lot of people would say, well, that really, that could, very much, lose some of the focus of who you are. My take on it is spoken word's been a tradition for a lot longer, and rap is just sort of the latest iteration of it.
Right.
It happens that it's commercially successful.
Right.
But why do folkies always turn their back on commercially successful things?
Well, that's an interesting point, and I think a lot of the debate about tradition versus singer-songwriter is really a debate about popularity, commercialism.
I'll tell you something else about your traddies.
Mm-hmm.
There ain't one of them who's I won't say one of them. There's very few of them who are authentic by their own definitions of traditional music. They're all revivalists.
Sure.
Every single musician has been influenced by whoever, they listen to or whatever. There's not too many people that really, use the oral tradition in the way that it was, kind of referred to 20, 30 years ago before there was, the internet,
sure,
compact discs and what have you. So I don't even know what the hell tradition means anymore, and I would really challenge anybody to give me a very workable definition, quite frankly. I believe that music is it's an arc, and what we do is we intersect that arc at various points along the way. So we might do Celtic music, which might have some of its roots back, hundreds, thousands of years ago. But what we're hearing now are 1999 musicians, who are adding their own thing to it.
Right.
So what does it mean, tradition? And what are these little white yuppie suburbanites who, have appointed themselves the keepers of the traditional flame? And what do they know?
Mm-hmm.
Did they hang out with somebody that gives them some sort of divine, whatever? I don't get it.
Sure.
I don't like fascists.
How do I know that at Malibu there's a reference in the notes. Just for reference, Phyllis Barney sent me the minutes that were made of the Malibu conference. They're pretty detailed, although of course you can't get all the flavor. But there's a reference there that Elaine Weissman had invited the representatives of numerous, what were referred to in the notes as ethnic groups, to come, but none of them showed up. And that's another common complaint I've picked up, and one I think that can apply to the whole revival as well, which is that revivalists and people who go to so-called folk music identified things tend to be white and middle class. How do you feel something like the Folk Alliance could bring within its umbrella real vernacular groups that don't call themselves folk music people but are making vernacular music out of their communities and get them to start coming there?
I think they have done it.
Mm-hmm.
Every year they bring in artists to showcase.
Right.
I remember in Memphis we saw the Campbells.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
It's just a stunning group.
I guess I mean more as members, more community organizations of the type of...
I don't think that the Folk Alliance has a whole lot that's relevant to them.
Okay.
Here's another kind of one of my pet peeves is the idea that, diversity, is a given. But does anybody ever bother to ask the people who are being diverse on whether they really care to be included in this great white, little musical
right
thing? It's patronistic and it's racist.
Well, that's
in my opinion. When we have something of relevance for African Americans, for Latinos, for musicians, from those, for any racial group, they'll find us.
right.
And we'll find them, and they'll come.
Right.
Now one of my staff members is a Mexican musician, and his group Sonos de Mexico showcased, I think, a year or two ago at a conference, and he got work out of it. So the Folk Alliance suddenly had some relevance to him.
Right.
But it was strictly a financial thing. It's only us white people that feel the guilt that, that we have to have people of color around us, or else we're somehow not true to, some political imperative. But it's a crock of shit.
I guess my question is really, why don't ethnic arts organizations, and I'm assuming they exist, I know they exist in certain pockets, why don't such organizations who have the same interests as any other small group arts organization, why don't they feel that there's some relevance in the Folk Alliance? Because I think you've told me that they don't see any relevance to them.
Well, if they do see relevance, then it's strictly an economic issue.
Okay.
and I wouldn't put myself up as an expert on why, organizations like the, what is it, the Caribbean Arts Center from New York don't attend Folk Alliance conferences, or, this organization or that organization.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering about. I mean, the revival as a whole is a white middle class phenomenon.
The Folk Alliance is a pretty white middle class.
Yeah, and I guess I'm just wondering what could be done, if anything, and maybe it's not appropriate to try, and I'm not sure if I'm hearing that from you. But those types of organizations, the Caribbean Arts Organization, for example, that you mentioned, with which I'm not familiar, but they could benefit as much as any other small arts organization from learning about fundraising, from learning about board techniques, or the things you mentioned.
Getting it somewhere else too. I mean, it's not like the Folk Alliance is the only, conference that has educational tracks. I mean, you go to APAP, there's educational tracks. You go to, there's 8 million arts conferences these days.
Right.
And they all do sort of the same thing.
Right.
I don't know, but let me make one thing clear. It's not that I don't think that we should reach out to those organizations, but what I don't think is that we should, be beating ourselves, up because they're choosing not to come.
Sure.
This is a market-driven thing, and just because some liberal white people want, ethnic organizations and people of color to come, maybe that's not enough. I think we should keep trying. I think we should keep marketing to them.
Right.
But if they choose not to come, then I think we need to summarize that either our product is wrong, or, there's something about, being involved with a folk music thing that is not appealing to them. I mean, and let me tell you why the Old Town School has spent the last 18 years doing diversity work with our audience. And, we've been, I think we're considered to be probably the most successful organization in Chicago in terms of developing a diverse audience.
Yeah.
And after spending probably well over $2 million in 18 years, we've been able to attract a little over 23% of our total audience are people of color. And we work our asses off for those folks.
Yeah.
We don't do it because it's the right thing to do. We do it because it's good business.
Yeah.
And we make money off of those customers. So I think the Folk Alliance needs to continue, because I think that if we could attract those organizations, it would make the conference better. I think that they would bring a lot to the table for us. But we got to figure out, what we have that they want, and then go about marketing it more intelligently. You know what I'm saying?
I understand.
Okay.
Have you given any thought to the showcase format? I don't know if you've been involved in that in the years. I know they tinker with it perpetually.
I'm a consumer of it.
Have you given any thought to ways it should be changed, in the future? If at all?
I don't really have any real strong opinions on it. I mean, I think whatever they do, they'll get criticized for.
Well, that's undoubtedly true.
Yeah, I mean, because anytime, there's that you have hundreds of people applying for very few slots, there's going to be a lot of disappointed people. They're going to be bitching and moaning and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Past that, I don't have a comment on that.
Right. A number of people have mentioned to me, and I see it myself, the idea that there's almost an aging of the audience for folk music in various incarnations. There's disagreement on that, but I think a lot of folks feel that it's, they're losing the 22-year-olds to some degree, and there's far too many 50-year-olds or 45-year-olds like me. And I know I go to some things in which at 45, I'm pushing the youngest end of the thing, and I came in at the tail end of the folk revival in terms of getting interested in music. Really the tail end.
Well,
do you have any thoughts on that?
What you're referring to is lack of organizational capacity in the institutions. And
okay, how do you mean? You have to elaborate on that a bit more.
Well, I'm going to elaborate on it a lot.
Okay.
Age demographics are a part of an overall marketing mix and a marketing scheme. And, again, I would guess that the reason that the ages skew so high is probably because I guarantee you that the artistic choices those organizations are making in terms of who they're putting on their stage is driving that skew.
Okay.
I mean, if you put Tom Paxton and, you know, Arlo Guthrie and Peter, Paul and Mary and John Gorka, who do you think you're going to get?
Sure.
You know, now you put Ani DeFranco on stage, and your age demos skew back the other way.
Right.
It becomes female, it becomes young, and it becomes sexually ambiguous.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it's like any other business decision: is that you have to target markets. You know, you need to segment them, and then you go after them. Now, again, I can speak mostly best for the Old Town School. Somebody once asked me, you know, can you explain the demographics of your audience? I said, sure. It changes every hour.
Right.
In the mornings, we had children ages 6 months that take lessons here. We've got 2,000 of them. So 2,000 of the 5,000 people that study music with us every week are between the ages of 6 months and like 8 years. Okay?
Yeah.
So I'm not having that problem.
Right.
Then, in the afternoon, my private students start to arrive, and they're teenagers, and like, you know, kids from like, you know, 9, 10 years old up to 16, 17 years old. Early evening, we'll start getting young adults. The majority of our adult students fall between the ages of 22 and 45. And then my concert audience changes depending on who I put on stage. If I put Tom Paxton on stage, I need oxygen in the room just in case. But if we put, you know, someone like Ani, like I said, the numbers go the other way. So organizations that are, and it's the same thing that you hear from symphony orchestras nowadays. Oh, the audience is aging. Well, of course the audience is aging because you're not doing one goddamn thing. You're not putting anything on your stage that would make it younger. So if that's the case, I say look at the product and look at who you're targeting from a marketing standpoint. We hired a marketing director 5 years ago. She was the head of international marketing for Citibank. And, you know, her job is to identify opportunity clusters and to go after them. And that's what we do.
Right. When you want to work with, to get back briefly to or at length to vernacular music, or what we're referring to as ethnic groups, how do you, who's putting it on? Is it you and the people in your staff putting it on? To what extent do you involve yourself with community groups who are working more organically with a specific type of music with which you may be, for example, unfamiliar?
We involve ourselves. We made a huge commitment to that.
You may talk a little bit about how that process might work, or use an example? Sure.
In the first place, we have a full-time staff member whose sole job is to interact with ethnic communities at that organic level.
Mm-hmm.
Full-time employee. He's probably got a budget of close to $500,000 to do this work. Okay? He's supported by our entire marketing team, as well as our production team. And essentially, I mean, we do a number of projects, but I'll tell you about one that I think is really interesting. We actually hire people to be what we call community ambassadors. So we want to interact, let's say, with the Pacific Island community.
Yeah.
We'll hire someone who we identify through referrals, through interviews, and through research, who is really plugged into that community to help us develop contacts, to help us develop programming for the community, and it all culminates in a directory that's written for that community that we get, as well as a community celebration where we work with artists from the community, and more times than not, that community celebration will happen outside of our building. Sometimes it will happen in. That's one program that we use to engage the community.
Okay.
How's that relevant to the Folk Alliance?
How is it relevant? Maybe beyond maybe perhaps teaching people to do that. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one technique we use. There's others. For instance, we do very targeted mailings to ethnic communities. We put a publication out for our Latino audience,
Mm-hmm.
and we put another publication out for our African American segments. So we do actual bilingual for the Latinos publications, just stuff like that. It's all part of a fairly comprehensive, pretty well-funded plan.
Now again, I'm wondering how you, I'm trying to figure out, and I wrestle with this all the time. I mean, have you ever put on a rock band? Or would you put on a rock band?
Well, we put on people that some people might think of as rock bands, but we don't put them on unless we think that there's a real connection to something a little bit more rootsy. For instance, we do a group like Wilco.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, Jeff is a friend of ours. This kid is one of our Wigglworm students.
Oh, one of your what students?
Wigglworm, that's our early child music program.
Oh, is that right? Is that what his kid, you said?
Yeah.
Or he was?
His kid.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And do you get kids to come out for something like that, or some of the college kids in the in the area?
Sure.
Right. What about you talked a few minutes ago about, you touched on the political coloration of the revival. Have you seen that change? You've been involved with Old Town School since the 70s, haven't you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Have you seen that change a bit? That lefty image fade away or revive, or was it there? I imagine it was stronger in the 70s than now.
I'll tell you, I don't think it's completely faded away. And depending on the organization, my guess is it's still the dominant culture.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I don't think I've got a sort of a global enough view to make a sweeping comment about that. I mean, what I've observed at the Folk Alliance is that that you've got a fairly liberal left orientation there.
Now, does the Old Town School ever tap into it specifically? Have you done topical music programs? And obviously, I don't care per se about the Folk Alliance. I want to know. Okay, and what?
Well, I mean, we've had Psychon do shows here, and Guy Carawan has performed here.
Right.
I mean, we don't shy away from that. I mean, the difference between us is that we don't think that that's the beginning or the end of it.
Right.
I mean, I see that the revival is a wonderful little stream of the huge river of folk music, but I don't think of it as anything more than a stream, or a little tributary.
Right. Now, was that
a tributary? Because that would actually give it, early veracity. It's actually sort of like a little delta, kind of where the river opens up into the ocean. Making sure my analogies are accurate.
I'll pin this down. Did the Alliance ever wrestle with the political coloration? Did it bother them? Did they want to neutralize it, embrace it, avoid it?
I don't think that. I would hope that they take a neutral view of it, because I don't really think that it's trade organizations, which is essentially what the Folk Alliance is, really should be about the business of setting political agenda or responding along political agenda. But of course, in our business, that's going to always be a part of things. And I just, I think that the Folk Alliance needs to find the proper balance for it.
Right.
I don't think you turn your back on anything. Like I said, I like the tent to be pretty big, and that's part of it. We don't turn our backs on it. I don't think the Folk Alliance should either.
Now
I don't think it should be leading with it either.
Sure. Now, you never actually served on the board, am I correct? I know that Mike Miles did.
No, I never actually served as a board member.
Right.
I did my year as a steering committee member, and I really felt that at that point in time, that was the most important contribution that I could make. I've recently told them that I'd be willing to serve, but I think that right now they've got way too many people from Chicago on the board as it is, so I've kind of withdrawn my name for the time being.
You probably had your plate full as well.
Yeah, but I mean, the Folk Alliance is something that I care about, and it's something that I've made a commitment to. So, to the degree that I can, bring anything positive to the table for them as a board member or as whatever they want me to do, I'm, interested and committed to doing that.
Right. What were during the steering committee sessions? Can you recall? I know we're reaching back. Can you recall anything that was, a point that was debated heavily, a point on which there was controversy or contention in hashing out what this thing was gonna be? And I don't mean acrimony, but I mean controversy and contention.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there were. Actually, one of the funniest things that I remember actually goes back to the Malibu meeting, where. Did you hear about how how they chose the steering committee?
I've heard some stories. I don't remember it right now. I know they put up a bunch of people, and it got whittled down sort of by dropouts to a degree. And then there was the issue of married people voting as a unit or voting separately. I don't know if that's what you're referring to.
Well, it's funny because the first night there, as I recall, Elaine invited sort of a hand-chosen group of people to meet, and basically the tenor of that thing was, this is going to be the steering committee.
Right.
And somebody, and I don't really recall who, said, well, we really think that this needs to be handled in a more democratic process.
Sure.
Instead of people being appointed. So that thing. So we kind of put it forth the next day that we'd create a steering committee, and the 130 people that were there voted to do that, and then people were nominated, and then those of us that got chosen, were voted for, and we were on. So we all met that first night.
Right.
And we were talking about, coming together for the first meeting, and there was, very early on, I kind of suggested, it seems to me that we could really benefit if we would hire a facilitator to do this. And we spent the next 30 minutes arguing about it. And finally, it was Margot Blevins said, you know what? At the beginning of this conversation, I sort of disagreed that we needed it, but after just listening to the last 30 minutes of this argument, we better damn well have a facilitator.
Well, that's a vestige of the old lefty influence. If you've read anything about SDS meetings, that would go on for 14 hours because everyone had to have their say. I think
they decided to hire a facilitator. So
right.
That was like sort of an early kind of contentious thing, and I think it was really indicative of, you had a lot of people that came to Malibu that ran folk music organizations that really didn't know anything about how to run organizations.
Sure.
And in fact, if there's a weakness in the Folk Alliance, is that you still have a bunch of people running organizations that aren't exactly high tech, in terms of the techniques and the wherewithal of managing organizations.
Right.
But even in spite of that, at Malibu, the idea of doing things in a more professional way kind of won the day.
Sure.
And so the first meeting, we had a very good facilitator who kept us on agenda, on time, and we got the work done.
How did Elaine manage? My question may be off base a little bit in its premise, although I think I heard you say it before. How did she manage to skew, I say that without condemnation, the election for the steering committee? I mean, she had a vision. She wanted professional people. How did she make sure that the committee ended up being people that she was comfortable with and were pros?
Here's how I think it worked. The first couple of days, people were invited up to speak.
Right.
And those people who were invited to speak sort of became invested with, not power, but maybe cachet.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. And in some respects, really what you had were the people that kind of represented the larger, more successful organization.
Right.
Sing Out had been around for a million years. The Old Town School had been around for a million years. Of course, Clark and Elaine being on it was a given because they were, the people that had come up with the idea.
Right.
You had folks from the Philadelphia Folk Festival, a big organization. You had Margot from Augusta, if not a big organization, at least a very well thought of and fairly established organization,
right,
with a great reputation. Then you had, then they sort of went out of their way to make sure that there were some small organizations so that there would be, all different viewpoints, which of course is something that we always must adhere to. So you had someone like Jewel Olsen, who represented Fox Valley, which is a wonderful but small, very grassrootsy little folk organization here in Illinois. You had Shelley, what's-her-face? Ramalis from some small Canadian thing.
Yeah.
And then you had the Paytons, who I guess were supposed to represent artists, I think. And of course,
they've been around a million years too.
And they've been around a million years, and certainly represent that, that kind of quote traditional music cohort that you were talking about. even though, again...
Very opinionated, too, I got to tell you.
Well, and they're revivalists.
Sure.
You know, I mean, these people aren't keepers of the flame. They're keepers of their own damn flame.
Right.
You know? And I like Sandy and Caroline. I mean, they're super nice people. But, you know, I mean, I just think that there's a certain amount of, you know, I think it's a little goofy. You know, when people kind of self-appoint to be, you know, keepers of this or that. I mean, what were they born to, you know?
Yeah.
And they didn't come out of the backwoods.
Right.
Anyway.
What's your take on volunteer organizations? I know you have some opinions that at least I've gleaned
I think
how they can work.
Organizations are great.
Uh-huh.
I think that, and I think to be big or to be small is one of the most important strategic decisions that any organization makes. And organizations that decide to be small and grassroots for good strategic organizations, or for good strategic reasons, I respect the hell out of them.
Yeah.
So, what, you know, I mean, the thing is that the world of folk music is made up to a large degree of those kind of organizations, and they don't really have the wherewithal to move the field forward very significantly. I think that, you know, ideally our world needs a nice mix of big, well-institutionalized, well-established organizations like the Old Town School, as well as like the cool little grassroots ones that, you know, will pick up some of the stuff that the big ones won't do.
Sure.
So, yeah.
What was your feeling about letting independents or individuals, I want to say, into the alliance as members? I know there was a debate about an organization of organizations, which I think was Mark Moss's take, and other people who said, well, let individuals join as such.
Well, you know, I guess, you know, I sort of went along with Mark initially on that. But I certainly see the value of the individual members. I mean, I don't think that I was 100% right on that one. You know, again, I like the Big Tent notion.
Right.
And I like the fact that the conferences, that there are thousands of people there. It's exciting. It's a great environment.
Yeah.
You know, and let's face it, artists to a pretty, you know, significant degree affect our business. So to keep individual artists out just makes no sense, I guess, if you think about it in that light.
Right.
So I don't know. I guess I'm glad they're there. I wish that and I think that Phyllis is really doing a better job of it this year, is making sure that the program committee ensures that there's opportunities for organizational growth, and that it's just not all focused towards the individuals and the singer-songwriters.
Right.
But I'll tell you, I wouldn't want her job. That's a high wire act if there ever was one.
Yeah, I've grown to get a sense that it's pretty thankless. I've been on a nonprofit board, albeit of a very different type of organization, but we did not see ourselves as people who were to think about the day-to-day running of the organization that was involved. And I get a sense there's been a lot of people over the years on the Folk Alliance board that really want to be on her back.
Oh, it's
about. Well, you must deal with the. Do you deal with the board? Is that the? Yeah, you're a nonprofit, sure. So I guess you know the difference between managers and broad policy setters on boards.
Yep, and Folk Alliance, of course, has been transitioning from a hands-on board, which it had to be at the beginning because it didn't have the money for staff, and is now, you know, transitioning towards a staff-driven organization. But, you know, folkies don't like to let go of shit. I mean, again, the lack of institutional sophistication is, you know, becomes a problem.
Sure. Do you want to tell me why the Weissmans seem to have become the revered founders that many people don't talk to when they wander around the conference?
Boy, I'll tell you, I just do not comment on that.
Okay, that's fine.
You know, I mean, I would go off the record with you.
Can I turn off the tape?
Yeah.
I'd like to hear. We can go back on later. I've been told by, and this may be way out of your purview, or maybe you do have some thoughts on it, because you know, you've got.
I have thoughts on everything.
You have thoughts on things which I'm finding useful, but you're also much more to the point than many people. But I've interviewed Ken Irwin at length, not about the Folk Alliance, although we've touched on it, predominantly about the work he's done at Rounder over 30 years, or just about 30 years. And he's telling me, and Chris Strachwitz has told me, that hardcore traditional records, vernacular records, contemporary field recordings of Kentucky banjo just don't sell too much anymore at all. And
does that shock anybody?
No, and I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on where it's gone, what's happened. Chris told me that in the 60s, and I'll grant you the 60s, even in the 70s, he could maintain his record company. He said, I couldn't do what I did nowadays at all.
Mike, what did I just say like 3 minutes ago? If you don't change, you become irrelevant, you die. Mm-hmm. So if you founded the Front Porch Kentucky Banjo label, you're probably out of business.
Yeah.
Because the world changes. The things that the world is interested in changes. Maybe if you took the Kentucky banjo player and sampled it or something.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe you could, sort of reinvent a thing for it. You know what? I've got a call. Can you hold on a second?
Sure. Well, then in that regard, do you see value in pure preservation?
Sure.
Okay. How do you do it then in this climate?
How do you do it?
How do you do it? How do you maintain? If you can't sell the records out there, if you got to appeal to audiences.
Am I wrong? But didn't they just re-release that?
The Harry Smith.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Didn't that do pretty darn
Great
well?
acclaim. Great acclaim. Absolutely.
Well, so I guess what you do is that you got to be smart. You've got to find a good niche to sell it to, or you got to find some sort of marketing hook to hang it off of.
Okay.
Because every other good record person is thinking creatively about how to repackage and resell product.
Right.